Let's look closer on the animation timeline. You notice right here on the bottom we have a kind of like small bar showing again. This is a preview. To work with animations, you probably want to expand so you can access more properties. Before we do this, let's look right here. We have our animations, or kind of control for our preview animations. We have it also enabled. For example, right here it's animation keyframe. So if we left click, it's have a pop-up menu where we have it after keyframe, what is meaning anytime when I move my object, like for example, let's select sphere, we go to add keyframe, and now if I take my timeline and move, for example, 3 seconds, take my object, move it, you'll notice it's automatically creating a keyframe, so snapshot. Now when I start moving between this, the animation's already created, and this is point add because after keyframe is enabled. You can always disable keyframe after made it. So in this case, if I move it and move my object, you can notice no line display. Its visual display means no keyframe was detected. So if I go back and start playing again, it's only stop where I did before. This is when you start work with animations, sometimes it can be confusing. If you have a keyframe enable as example, and you may be on the middle of animations and you take your object and adjust or something, and certainly you notice your path now for object is changed. It's not what you wanted because you have keyframe enable. It is useful when you're overall creating path, but it can be problematic. And another option, for example, if I have another orb, if I have a sphere right here, I move it and something happened and I don't want to move in another animations, like right here I don't even set keyframe, but it's already add some keyframe for me for this orb that I don't want to use it, or sphere. To fix this, remember you can always go to animation tab for your object is selected and disable animation. So in this case, if I move it and after keyframe is enabled, the animation won't be generated for this object. This is a useful option to remember when you work with after keyframing, that block animations, stop animations, or in this case cancel any animations on after keyframe will be useful for those stationary objects you don't want to change but you maybe want to switch. Also, if you take position and press in a beginning, then you can modify some of your objects without generating keyframe, even if they enable animations on them. You can still move on the beginning without generating any keyframe. So 2 ways. If you don't want animated, be sure you're on the first frame, or disable animation for the selected objects. Okay, so let's go ahead back to our sphere. You notice right here we have animations, and because I did move on the middle, we have 2 keyframes. So by using your navigation, you can always stop, okay, beginning, jump to next keyframe, back, stop, play, okay, you can see right here, or go to next keyframe. So you can go between keyframes, which has become useful if you want to edit. So as example, if I want to edit this middle keyframe, I can jump to this, readjust my keyframe, and now you can see I adjust point. So if you try some problem is sometimes you maybe won't be exactly in the middle. So if you just miss something and start adjusting, certainly now you start creating another keyframe as well. Don't worry too much because you always can delete, undo, or just remove specific keyframe if you need it. So you can select the keyframe and you can remove the keyframe if you need it. Okay, so let's look closer. Next, what we have it is after keyframe, add keyframe to all properties. Each object you can animate multiple properties as not just location, size, also color, twist, materials, and you can also animate atmospheres and many different and light intensity. So you have a lot of properties you can animate it, and you can specify if you want animate just specific property or you want keyframe just one of them or all of them. But how you can access, by default, you notice right here we have only one timeline, but right here on the left bottom side we have these triangles, which is specify to expand those areas. So if we click on first one, you'll notice right here we have our keyframe for each property. For example, we have our position, keyframe it right on the side. Next we have size, twist, pivot, and materials. We don't have some of those modified yet, so we don't have any timeline posted for us, but you can see that properties we can modify. So for example, if we expand again position, you'll notice right here we have X, Y, and Z. So we can also work with those keyframing. The next we have graphs. And graphs, it's allowed us to see direction, velocity of all specified properties. So currently you can see right here we have a Z position for our sphere, and because we're going kind of up, okay, right here, this is represented with our Z position. So if we select all position, before, if you remember, I select Z so I can isolate it, X and Y, Y and X. So if we select all position, we can see the representations in the colors. We can also access directly from this position and modify it. Notice as soon when I start modifying, my keyframe start changing, so it's showing me different placement for that keyframe. Again, right here, keyframe, it will be from 0 to 3 seconds, and I can modify, take down to the ground example. You can see right here we have our sphere now below, or I can take it's directly on the meters, and it says, okay, I want this 20 meters, I want it before, and I want to place it right here. So I can modify those settings. As we're speaking about some modify of these graphs, currently you can see it's a smooth curve with the handles, so we can change curvature of this. If you need it sharp, you can always right click and change type of the grid of the curve you're using. So right here you can see we have a smooth. We can switch to linear, which create a sharp corner. We can modify this way. Okay. So you'll have a numeric smooth constant, smooth easy in and out. Again, you can modify here, not just only by using wizard. Linear we saw before, steps. We have custom, it's what currently, because we changed some curvature. We have it smooth in, smooth out, easy, line, custom, and also depend on a smooth in and smooth out, two different inputs. And also we have additional curve options where we can extend zoom time, and values. So this is all options will require a little bit more advanced jumping into the animations. So right now let's just play a little bit more with some velocities with positions on objects, so we can modify it through the graph. Okay, and next options, it's opening preview. You take a few seconds to preview generated. I don't use that options very often when I'm work, because it's take a little bit time to render, and also I don't find that very useful for me. But let's wait a second till it's finish pre-render our thumbnail. Okay, well, on thumbnails finish pre-render, you can see right here we kind of have our camera and sphere just going above, so we only see the shadows, but overall it's what we'll do and create for us some preview window so we can see some motions applied. How to say again, in some cases it may work when you work with primitives and run very fast preview, but personally I'm almost never used that. So next thing, sometimes you don't want to see per time in a seconds, you maybe want to see frames. So if you want to change how the navigation bar or how timeline displayed, you can just right click anywhere on timeline, and you notice right here we have additional options for us. So we have it play animation, we also have it show time. Currently it's set is seconds. We can have it SMTP or we can have it frames. So for example, let's set on the frames. You can see right here we have it per each frame. So 10 frames, 20 frames, 30 frames. To work with frames, if you're going inside, okay, actually let me close this property. We can go inside the animation, and right here you can specify advanced animation properties or how many frames per second you want to animate. So let's go left click, we open, and you notice right here we have it frame rate. So this is where we can specify how many frames per second we want to use it. So in this case, if we're using 24 frames per second, let's go switch to the film. So now I know when I will go about 24 frames, this is about 1 second of animation for me. So it's depend again, what do you prefer, the timestamp, frames, or seconds? You can always select which is more preferable for you. So for the purpose of the tutorial, I'm switching back to the seconds so we can kind of preview that way. Next, we also have it current time. So we can move to any specific animation start and end, same what we have it in our animations control. We can also move by 1 frame up and down. We can move current type or constrain the type. So we have it quite a bit actually seconds. So sometimes you maybe want to exactly go by 1 frame and it's hard. You can always move it and adjust. Okay, we have a scale animations. You can scale by enabling and move how much you adjustments. Remember, if you want also zoom on your timeline till we speak about scaling, you can right click and move your timeline with hand up here, or you can hold down Control or Command and you have it now up here of the zoom button. So same by holding down key, click and hold the right button on the mouse, you can zoom in or out of your timeline. Again, we can zoom in, right click, and pan through our timeline. So this way will be a little bit easy to look in our timeline per second or kind of zoom in our time. Okay, so let's go bring back. Okay, and next you also notice right here we have a keyframe. So we can add keyframe directly from timeline without using button or move any specific object. As well, we can enable or disable after keyframing. We can destroy object animation without disabling animation. So for example, if I don't like animation for this object, I can destroy it, and now this my sphere, it does not have any information for animations anymore. I can restore this, or in this case, for example, I can take my sphere, let's put down to the ground. Okay, we'll go to keyframing, so we'll add keyframe to all properties directly from here. We'll move now again to 3 seconds, and we'll move our straight. And again, because keyframe after keyframe is enabled, it's created for us as soon when I finish and release my object on a new location. It did create keyframe at this point. So let's go look next. We have it also zoom to timeline, what we look right now, set animation start and end point. And sometimes you want to change a little bit your animation, how long it started. I find out use this when I import animations from Poser, and for example some of them won't start instantly or needed to have kind of a little bit startup point. So in this case you can always move your mouse, select, and you can move start animation for your object. As well, you can set the clipping area where you want to render for your animation on top. So again, we have our animation clipping. So it's mean when I start render, it won't render from 0 second, it start from 1 second, and it's continue to 3 seconds, so it will be 2 seconds. Probably this option of limiting or clipping render time you want to use when you animated maybe clouds and you want them distributed properly, so maybe you want to do this or some other properties. And animations, if you don't want objects start animated from 1st second, so you want for 1 second maybe just stay still and start moving after. So in this case you can always change your animation start point. As well, we can change our animation endpoint as well. Okay.